Mississippi, streaming at SuperTalk.fm and SuperTalkTV.com. We are 1 week away from the start of the college baseball season. Happy to be joined by our buddy Chris Burke. He is a college baseball analyst with ESPN and the SEC Network, All-American at Tennessee. He was a big leaguer and an all-around good dude. And my man, we're close. We're close.
Yes.
A week from today, we're playing college baseball.
Yeah. And it started, I don't know how the weather is in Mississippi, but here in Kentucky, we've had some more sunshine. It's starting to get a little warmer, starting to feel like the spring a little bit. And, of course, when college baseball tees off, spring is here. So it's exciting time.
Berkey, today, this afternoon, at what would be first pitch time, it's going to be 70 and sunny in Oxford. Now, a week from today, maybe not.
We're not sure. Yeah.
We'll see. All right, hey, let's start here. So last year, going into the season, what we felt like we knew was, man, there are a bunch of arms in the SEC. Bunch of arms, whether you're talking about Vanderbilt or Ole Miss or Arkansas or Mississippi State, whatever.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of unknown this year on the arms. Now, we'll get to the bats in a second because we know a lot on that side.
Yeah.
What do you make of pitching in the league going into this season?
Well, I think you nailed it. I think there's some interesting storylines, not as much of a slam dunk storylines. One of those is injuries. I mean, Blade Tidwell, probably the top prospect from a starting pitching standpoint in the league at Tennessee, is out. Now, I think there's some hope that he's not out for the whole season, but he's out to start. Maybe the next most interesting prospect in the league was a closer all year last year, Landon Sims, right? And so what does he have? Peyton Paulette, who was going to be one of the best prospects in the league from Arkansas. He is out for the year. He had Tommy John. But Jackson Wiggins is there who, dazzled last year at times and struggled last year at times. But, starting pitcher with a fastball up to 100 miles an hour. There's always an influx of big talent that has shown up to campus. Of course, now in the transfer portal world, we have new arms that are coming in the league that have done well at maybe lesser programs. I think Hunter Barco at Florida is probably laying in the weeds just a little bit. But if you've seen Hunter Barco throw 6'5", 6'6" left-hander for Florida that's, pitches in the mid-90s, he might end up being kind of that guy as the year unfolds.
And we should all be shocked, right, that Florida's got a first-round arm under Sully.
Yeah.
We should be shocked by that, right?
Spoiler alert, Florida has talent on the mound. Florida might go with 3 lefties in their rotation, interestingly enough. And then Georgia, I think Georgia has, Jonathan Cannon could have been a top 3 or 4 round pick last year, decided to come back. I think he was a draft-eligible sophomore. But most people think he'll be a top 50 pick. So, but you're right. Normally it's arm. And this year, more question marks than exclamation points.
You don't care about all that pitching stuff, though, right? I mean, it's about the sticks, and good grief, are there some sticks. All right, so we can talk about individual offenses in a second, but a conversation we were having here on the show, good grief, earlier this week, maybe late last week, there are only 2 guys in the league last year that hit 20 bombs. You could make an argument for a dozen that could hit 20 this year.
Yeah.
And I know that's a really, really big number in college baseball, but when you look at what's coming back with Cruz and Dugas and the addition of Barry at LSU, with Tim Elko and Justin Bench and Kevin Graham and Jacob Gonzalez at Ole Miss, with Logan Tanner and some of those guys at Mississippi State, with those guys at Arkansas, am I crazy to think you could have a dozen guys hit 20 home runs?
Probably, but I would say 15 to 20.
Okay.
I would almost take the bet. I will say too, I was talking about this with somebody last weekend, the bats are still BB core, but the bats are not at all the original version of BB core.
Yeah.
And I don't have any science to prove that. And of course we know the balls are different, right?
They're hot,
but
though,
just
right? The bat's hot now.
I don't think they're hot, but they're just not the dead as a doornail version that we had. What was it, 2011 or whatever, when that first started. And the balls have really improved. And I'm all in on our brand of ball right now. I think it's a very healthy balance. The balls hit well, it goes out of the park. But yes, I think, of course, Judd Fabian, one of the guys who hit 20 home runs, is back, right? Back with a lot to prove. I mean, turned down huge money to come back. Florida, just in general, I mentioned Barco and Fabian. Like, nobody's even hardly talking about Florida, even though they still are right around the top 10 in most polls. But, last year they were number one. And so we spent a lot more time talking about them. But I really think the Arkansas, LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss offenses are as scary as any that I've seen preseason from a bunch standpoint. Like, you might have one offense that you're like, wow, but to have four of them, and I don't know, because I would have a hard time if you gave me the choice picking which one I would pick first. And part of that is because of
you
how
just ruined where I was going next. Pick one of those four. You got to pick one of those four. And so what are you thinking about, right? I mean, maybe the best 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5 in America with LSU.
Well, don't forget Dugas and Doty. You got Barry, Trey Morgan, and Dylan Cruz, but don't forget.
I wasn't even including Trey Morgan.
You weren't even, who was an all-league player and one of the most dynamic players in the league. With Ole Miss, you got Gonzalez and you got Elko and you got Graham and you got Dunhurst, like just so much experience. And Ole Miss seems to always rake, but it's just like, uncle, where do I go for a breather? How do I get out of this inning kind of thing? Mississippi State, maybe not quite as proven, but Logan Tanner, I think Kellen Clark's going to have a monster year. I think Luke Hancock's as tough as out as there is in the league. I think Brad Cumbus could do some good things. So I would probably put Mississippi State, maybe, again, you're talking about the elite offense. But the one that's really interesting to me is Arkansas. You got Robert Moore and Jalen Battles. Caden Wallace, I think, is going to be a star. People don't realize Brady Slavin's led the league in total bases. Yeah. And Peyton Stovall, I'm predicting Peyton Stovall is going to be like Todd Walker Jr. Like, couple $1 million he turned down. He was a surefire first-round pick, and all of a sudden he ends up at Arkansas. D1 baseball has him predicted as the SEC Freshman of the Year. He's just a pure hitter. So now a little bit that's projection, right? Like with Ole Miss, you kind of know what you got because you got a bunch of guys that have already done it. But man, it's going to be a war in the SEC West. It always is, but offensively, man, it's crazy over there.
Yeah, the coaches poll came out yesterday, and it's got Arkansas winning the West, Ole Miss and State tied for second, and then LSU at fourth. But the same group of coaches, because of the way they voted, had Ole Miss winning the SEC overall. And then you got Arkansas one vote behind them, and then you got this group of Mississippi State, Florida, and LSU who all got a couple of first-place votes. This is the coaches who are in the league.
Yeah.
And there's no runaway anywhere.
No. Look, it's going to be the SEC has positioned themselves. There's a couple teams that are probably going to take their lumps this year, but the SEC has positioned themselves where we've seen it. Of the last 8 teams that have been in the final game, the College World Series finals, 6 of those teams have been SEC teams. So, like, they positioned themselves to a point where really 17, 18 wins, you're a national seed. Like, you really, because you're non-conference, you're probably going to be, you're probably going to be at 40 to 45 wins. And if you win 17 and 18 games in a league that has 6 top 10 teams, like, you're certainly one of the best 8 teams in the country, right? So the reason why I love covering the league is because of what we have this year, and it seems like it every year, but this year maybe even more so. Every single game is a playoff game, because the difference at the end of the year for Ole Miss winning 19 games or 20 games or 16 games or 17 games is huge ramifications in the postseason, right? It changes where my national seeding is. It changes, am I just hosting a regional, or am I definitely hosting a super regional as well, right? Like, starting in the middle of March, every single game is like a Major League Baseball playoff game. And covering it selfishly is such a blast because you don't have to fake drama. Like, it exists because the games in the middle of March count the same as the middle of May when the NCAA committee gets together and decides who those top 8 and who those top 16
are last year at the end, right? So Tennessee was good, and they built throughout the season, and they built a little momentum with that fan base. They're able to hang on to Tony Vitello during the offseason. Great crowds at the regional. There's all this excitement. Is that sustainable excitement, or does it have to be a great year that builds, and then in May when the weather's good, everybody's like, yeah, baseball? Or can Tennessee get to a spot like it is, maybe not exactly like it is here in Mississippi? Sorry, we're doing this from home.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Where they're talking about college baseball on the radio in January.
Yeah. Well, I will say I just went and did the banquet down there.
Yeah.
The banquet was completely sold out at this huge grand event. And they announced yesterday, I believe, that season tickets are completely sold out. So I don't know that that's ever happened at Tennessee.
Yeah.
But certainly that's in recent memory the first time that's ever happened. So as far as now, you still got to play the games, and you still got to keep people in the seats and get them to give them a product that. But I would say that Tony has done such a great job of connecting with the fan base, and it was perfect timing for him because when Tennessee was at its lowest point, just kind of from a fan standpoint with all the mess that was going on with football last year, he and his group showed up and gave them something to really cheer for. Of course, the pandemic played into that a little bit, right? People were just ready to feel good about something and get outdoors and congregate and fellowship. So I do think, and they've done some nice things with the facility. They haven't gotten to their big redo and the big renovation that's coming, but they put in some way more seating up the third base line. They did a second deck of party decks out in the outfield. So the left field area at Tennessee is going to have a SEC West feel to it. So that's going to be pretty cool. I mean, people have realized, wait a second, baseball games are a blast. Yeah, it's a party. That's right. So I do think you still got to go play the games, and we'll see how they do. I think they're going to be very competitive. But I would say the answer to that is yes. I think Tony captured their imagination, and now the fan base has really understood what you and I have always known, and people in Mississippi have led with, is college baseball is a blast, and you get it 3 days in a row. Football, you get eight home games a year, right? College baseball gives you 35, sometimes 30, 35 home dates, and you get to see Tennessee play Florida 3 days in a row. It's not just one day and everybody goes back to where they came from. And so when people fall in love with that, as obviously you guys represent so well in the state of Mississippi, man, it gets contagious and people get all in.
I want to finish here. You talked about him earlier. Landon Sims is one of the most interesting phenomenons for me. He was it was when he came into the game last year, it was over. And yet Chris Lemonis was very judicious with the way that he used him throughout the season. Mm-hmm. We saw Kevin Kopps go 35 times, 34, 37, whatever the number was last year.
100.
Over and over and over. It was incredible. But he was uniquely capable of doing that. Mm-hmm. Chris Lemonis said, I'm saving Landon Sims for when it matters the most at the end of the year. And they ran him out one time a weekend. And when they ran him out, it was over. Different role this year where they're saying, we're going to roll him out one time a weekend, but it's going to be on Friday night. Go give me 6 innings, give me 7 innings. It feels like this is going to work. It doesn't always work. Tell me why it might work and why it might not.
Well, I'll say what I like about it and what I don't like about it. Kind of the same. I think it's kind of a different way of answering the same question. What I like about it is you're going to get more of Landon Sims. And selfishly, we love watching Landon Sims pitch. So you get to see more of Landon Sims. And I think Chris Lemonis is so judicious, like you said, that I think just because he's a starter now, I think they kind of know that they need to let that build. And it wouldn't surprise me if Landon Sims doesn't pitch into the 6th inning, unless his pitch count happens to be crazy low, which is not really the style of pitcher he is, until May. Like they might stay real tight with him for a long period of time. But what I like about it for him as a prospect, he shows pro ball, he can do something different. From a team standpoint, he gets to get you more outs. Right. And from a fan standpoint, you get to see one of the most electrifying athletes, competitors in the sport for a longer period of time. Now, that being said, what I don't like about it is having played on teams, specifically our great Astro teams where Brad Lidge was the game's over when he comes in. The whole game feels different when you have that bullet in your holster. Like everything about it feels different. Like, we're playing a 7-inning game. we're playing an 8-inning game. The crowd knows it. When he starts getting loose in the bullpen, things tend to heighten. The other managers managing different because that bullet's in the back end of the bullpen. Like, it just changes everything. And we all know there's something different about those last 3 outs. Like, I don't know, it's just something different about those last 3 outs. And so that piece of it, I think that's why I make such a lot of people join me making that case for Kevin Kopps being the Golden Spikes last year and being the SEC pitcher of the year, because even though he didn't have the bulk of Rocker and Leiter, he was the most valuable pitcher in the league. There's no doubt about it. He ended up being the College Player of the Year.